Hello, hello. Okay, let's get started on Summary Lecture 5, Audience Insights. You might be asking yourself, why are we talking about audience again? Didn't we just pick an audience and then we started talking about what behaviors they're going to do? Yes, we did. But as I think I've warned you before, I really do think audience is sort of the key to all of this. You can't have good communication if you don't know everything you can about your audience. And here's the thing. I do know that you have already learned quite a bit about your audience and probably knew it ahead of time, which is why you ended up selecting one particular audience segment, right? I get that. But the new information you have now is what behavior you're going to ask them to do. So what happens is we now need to go back and kind of revisit like, okay, how do we want to think our priority audience is going to react now that we know what we're going to be asking them to do? So it's sort of like we got the audience based on who they are, we decided what the behavior is. So now let's go back and reassess and try to imagine like what's going to happen when we actually make this pitch to them and ask them to do the behavior. Um, so the types of things that you're going to be asked to consider, and I'll just go ahead and say this right now. If this was an actual social marketing campaign, what would be happening is you'd be doing research on this. Okay, so um, probably survey research, maybe focus group research. It would be all about like, let's take representatives from our target audience and then kind of give them maybe in a focus group scenario, for instance, like let's talk to them about this target behavior and try to figure out like what's going through their head about this, right? Or maybe we would just send out a survey to try to learn more about like how they perceive what you're trying to ask them to do. And different types of categories of the information that we're interested in are listed here. So on one hand, we're interested in like perceived barriers. You wouldn't have chosen this audience if they were already doing the behavior. So the question is why aren't they doing the behavior? Is it because like they have some sort of knowledge block? Is it because they, um, you know, maybe there's some sort of like barrier within their community. Maybe you want them to go and access some sort of service, but they don't have transportation or something like that. Also, what are the things that would actually kind of get them there? Like, what are the benefits that they would associate with this behavior? Or what are some of the potential motivators that you could maybe sprinkle into your campaign that would kind of, if they're on the fence about it, push them over the edge, right? Is there something that you could do that kind of could sway them on one side or the other, or really one side? And what sort of competition do we need to worry about? Like, what are the things that they would rather be doing? Or maybe there's some behavior that you're trying to get them to give up, and that we need to think a little bit more about in terms of like, right, what's that pull that that competition has that's going to make it hard for you to, get them to stop. And then finally, what sort of influential others are there? Are there people who could be leveraged? And these could, most students usually think about celebrities. We'll talk about that later, but really it could be any influential other to this particular audience, maybe somebody in the community, some sort of like role model who is already sort of modeling the behavior you want. Okay, so just to get in a little bit more in detail, if you're looking at perceived barriers, you're going to want to consider both internal barriers, so psychological stuff. Maybe, I've talked a lot about efficacy. There's this wonderful theory, social cognitive theory. Maybe you've heard of it if you've taken Psych 101 at any point in time or anything like that, where it really just talks about even if people want to do something, if they don't believe that they have the ability to do it, or if they don't believe that doing the behavior would result in what it purports to do, that's response efficacy, then why would they do it, right? So these are all things that could hold people back. Maybe they don't know how to do it. They need instructions and stuff. So I really want you to kind of think through like, what would hold somebody back from doing this behavior, which is clearly so beneficial. Otherwise, you wouldn't be promoting it. But there's also, as I mentioned, external barriers. So things that aren't within your participant, they're within your participant's environment. But sorry, I didn't. I'm a researcher here. They are not within your priority audience. They're within the audience's environment. Maybe something that's holding them back. It could be that again, some sort of financial barrier. Maybe there's not infrastructure to support what you want them to do. Like, Um, just thinking about like food deserts, for instance, right? Like you can have a campaign that like encourages people to eat more spinach or, whatever it is, but like if they don't really have access to those resources, then that's a huge barrier where even if they love spinach and they want to be like Popeye, like they literally can't do it because there's just nothing there for them. Also, cultural pressures, which you could say is sort of like related to psychology, but it is something from without them. Like maybe, there's a lot of stuff about a lot of literature on organ donation, where there are certain cultures that definitely discourage organ donation because of like various belief systems and things like that. And again, these are all things that you want to know about ahead of time, so you can think about how to contend with them. Okay, and desired benefits. So here's the positive. This is where you're trying to think like, okay, what kind of carrot could be dangled in front of them, that this should be something that they're already sort of sensing. So it could be like, maybe it's not why you want them to do the behavior, but there are other things that they would associate positively with the behavior. It could be, though, what you want them to do. So an example here is sort of like, yeah, you want people maybe to lose weight because, it affects various health outcomes. It's great for cardiovascular health and it's great for longevity or whatever. But you know what? Weight loss is also valued by our society. It makes people more attractive, right? So maybe that's something that is like a benefit that your target audience might lean into. Um, Same thing, making meals at home. Maybe you want somebody to do that because it's healthy, but also they could save some money doing it. And maybe that's actually a bigger incentive for them than what you want them to do. So I want you to think not just about the benefits not just the benefits that you already had in mind when you did the campaign, but really sit and think about your priority audience and what they would find appealing. Motivators are similar, but it's not stuff that they get out of the behavior as much as, okay, what are things we could give them? Think about this is more tangible goods or services or instructions or something like that. Stuff that, like, again, let's say they already are like, okay, my barriers are low. I do perceive the benefits here, but what could you give them to maybe push them over the edge? And these could all be linked, right? So remember, one of the barriers could be like, well, that seems like a good idea. I would love to do more yoga, but I don't have the skills for that. Okay. Well, what if we offered you, I don't know, a trial membership at, some yoga studio or coupons for for yoga mats or something like that, or apps that could teach you how, they have YouTube videos or something like that. It's again could be related to the benefits, but this is more like what is it that they need that maybe you could sort of like put into the mix for them. Think about it like that. So obviously there's like benefits, but this is more of a, okay, we've got them. If we have them where we want them, what a tangible sort of thing could we offer to kind of push them over? This also works just with like things that could already be out there. Maybe you had some of this in your situation analysis, like tax decreases. Remember for a while, not anymore, I don't think, but there were all these like tax incentives for buying electric cars. And so maybe a motivator is not something that you would do, but there's something out there that you could point to that if you're trying to get people to, you know, buy more environmentally conscious vehicles, you could be like, hey, did you know you also get this tax increase? That kind of stuff. So it's really about incentivizing compliance. The competition are behaviors that the target audience is doing instead of your behavior. Now, it could be the behavior itself, or it could also be people that are trying to encourage that behavior, or people or organizations. So, as I mentioned before, it would be like, okay, if you're trying to get people to stop smoking, then the behavior of smoking would be competition. But also, Philip Morris would be competition, right? The organization that's sort of like countering your message. These are things that you just want to have in mind because you are going to have to understand on some level that these are the things that you're going to need to counter, and you need to figure out like how much you need to push back about against that in your own messaging. Um, yeah, and I'll just say like a lot of these could just be habits, right? It's just sort of like it's not necessarily like um, uh, people don't want to do, we talked about earlier about how sometimes what's hard about social marketing is like you have to ask people to remember to do things that they're not used to remembering, right? It's new habit formation. So sometimes it's like the competition can just be like, oh, yeah, I forgot to, program my thermostat before I left the house or whatever it is. It doesn't always have to be some sort of sinister, tobacco organization type thing. Competition can come in many forms. Okay, and finally, we got influential others. So, as I mentioned before, people often think of celebrities, and that's natural. If you've heard of the Katie Couric effect, where Katie Couric influenced people to get more colon cancer screenings by going on TV. And then there was the Angelina effect, where I guess she had like I know she had the BRCA gene, and then she got like a double mastectomy. And then because people saw that example, they started talking about it more. They wanted to do it more themselves. And so yes, oh, I have a Kardashian example too. Also, I think they got tested for this BRCA gene, which of course is associated with breast cancer and cervical cancer and things like that. So, but even though it's fun to think of celebrities, I want you to think like even outside of the box. This is all related to your target audience, right? It could be influencers, it could be celebrities, it could be these high profile people, but it could also be like neighbors and coworkers and even doctors. The whole point is like it needs to be somebody who's already sort of exemplifying the type of thing that you're selling. So role models. Um, I remember years ago when I was in grad school, I went to grad school in Atlanta, and there were a lot of people who worked at the CDC. And at the time, this is before COVID, like long before COVID, they were talking about in the case of a pandemic, um, who are we going to go to get like the information out? And there were all these mega churches in Atlanta, and they were um, interviewing the pastors of these mega churches because they understood that the clergy for these large communities of people who go to these mega churches, like the clergy could be the most influential people there. So if the clergy were to get vaccinated, then everybody in the congregation would feel like it. So again, if you know of celebrities that are doing the behaviors or whatever, that's a great thing to mention, but don't feel like if you don't know that there's some um, influencer who um, is I'm trying I'm so bad. I know I should really like make lists about this ahead of time. Okay, so if you don't know about some influencer who is donating blood or on a regular basis or whatever the behavior you want, then don't worry about it. Like I think there's a lot of different influential others that you can think of. Um, Okay, and so as I mentioned before, like a lot of this anyway is kind of up to your imagination. Ideally, the way you would figure all this out is by asking people, like, who do you look up to, and who do you know who does behaviors like this, or what benefits do you see in this? I mean, you don't have access to that, obviously. I just want you to know that that would be the process. So right now, it really is up to you. As I always say, I want you to be smart about it. I want you to have an educated imagination, but don't don't be afraid to think about sort of like what you would consider ideal or what. I don't mind you making certain assumptions about your audience in order to get these insights, just so long as those assumptions are rooted in, some basic logic. So that's all. Um, and that is it. After you do all this, we're going to be ready to set up your marketing strategy, which is like kind of like drum roll, what we're here for with social marketing. And these audience insights are going to hopefully directly inform that because once you have these insights, you'll be able to sort of figure out what you want to speak to when you develop your messages. So on to the next one.